the next deputation is in relation to an item that we're going to discuss immediately following, because at the same time. Could I invite Ernest Tsao to come forward, and we'll deal with his deputation on the residential red zone horizontal infrastructure, item 14. Thanks, Ernest. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm a resident that's currently still living in the residential red zone, and I'm also representing the group Quake Outcasts. So to start with, the red zone is illegal, unlawful, as declared by the High Court, and the Supreme Court agreed. Because the government failed to consult with the people and unilaterally declared and instituted the residential red zone outside the law. So now we have this big mess today. The courts all agreed that the government had a clearance program and failed to properly compensate us, namely the uninsured property owners at this stage. It repeatedly made threats about a reduction and cutting off of services, which is what I'm going to talk about today. The courts agree with us that the offers that the government had offered us can be said as a Hobson's choice. You can have any horse you want as long as it's nearest to the gate. So I'm sure a lot of you might ask, why do you have no insurance? And it's your choice. That's why you're here today. But I can tell you it's not a matter of insurance. I want you to consider this. If you spend your own money to make repairs on your own house after the earthquakes, what difference does it make if you spend your own money or you spend the insurer's money? So the government has no right to come in and say, I don't want to compensate you for your house, but I just want to pay you for your land, and you can get out of here. So you can see that a lot of us are put in a very difficult situation. We have no choice but to stay. So I'm here to ask the council, please consider the remaining residents with compassion and understanding that we're not here by choice. So the horizontal infrastructure review can possibly be construed by residents as part of the government's squeeze on us to make our lives difficult, to quote Mr. Brownlee's own words. So I think there has been an overemphasis on the costs associated with this, and we feel like we are being blamed. We're victims, and we're being blamed for the costs, and it's not our doing. We have no choice. We didn't cause the residential red zone to happen. We didn't cause for the vast majority of our neighbors to move out. We didn't cause any of this to happen. So I want to point out a couple of issues. First is that there are some inaccuracies in the appendix, the maps, particularly the status or definitions of these maps. Personally, I think some of the definitions seem a bit subjective and arbitrary, particularly the definition around what's temporary and what's not. And I think, I'm speculating here, but possibly there might be some intentional understating of the actual conditions of these infrastructure that might make it easier for the government to justify future withdrawal or reduction of our services. So I ask the council, please do some fact-checking before approving points 3.2 and 3.6. Throughout the section of the report, it seems like there has been a preconceived notion that had been put into place. I'm guessing it's from the central government, and some elements within the government definitely wants to reduce the level of existing services to residents that are still working and functioning. For example, my house is on a permanent sub-main water supply ever since the big one, and it had never failed after the 8 weeks initial earthquake, and no service issues, no pressure issues, no contamination issues. I did regular chemical, biological, and dissolved solids testing on my own water supply, and there's no contamination whatsoever that I know of. So the concerns for possible contamination can be said to be a little bit overblown. I'm sure it might not be the same case in every household, but at least some places this is not a concern. So I ask the council, please ask staff members to do some more checking instead of just blanketly accept a temporary status on all the infrastructure that's around residents that are still remaining in the red zone. Secondly, the closing of roads might not save that much cost, since pretty much nothing is being done at the moment. Closing unnecessarily large amounts of roads can only cause further alienation to the residents that are still living here, and it serves as a reminder to us that we're not welcome to live in this neighborhood anymore. So let's go back to the water supply issue. I think part of the report mentioned trucking in water tanks may be a cost reduction measure, but what about fires? The fire engines servicing metropolitan city areas need a working fire hydrant to fight fires. They are not equipped like rural fire engines, fire appliances. So that's definitely a safety concern to residents that are still living here. I spoke with a staff member at council regarding fire hydrants, on-street fire hydrants that have not been properly maintained or marked by yellow paint and hasn't been for a number of years. And I've just recently noticed this. And I was quite thankful that the staff member had promised to get contractors to properly mark these fire hydrants. So to retrograde back into a rural-style service of trucking in water for remaining residents not only poses a health threat, but also a fire safety issue as well. Statistically, trucked-in tanks of water have a high chance of contamination. So to sum up, any policy decided based on the unlawful residential red zone can be said to be unlawful as well in some degree. I implore the council to consider its moral and ethical obligations and not just the minimum legal obligations to residents. Please do not put economics before compassion. Do not be the government's puppet. We have suffered more than enough.
Thank you. I want to pick up your first point, which is that if you were if you were on the other side of the road, you'd be in the green zone, and if your house was uninsured, you could have had it fixed up for what was minor damage to it in the earthquakes, and who cares whether you were insured or not? So why is insurance the big issue in determining whether you're getting paid a fair amount of money or getting a lowball offer?
Insurance is not an issue.
And
that's agreed by the courts.
The Supreme Court made it quite clear that insurance was a relevant consideration, but given that not everyone was uninsured, it sort of made it sound like it was everyone's fault for not being insured, but it's irrelevant to the decision. If you were compulsorily acquired, wouldn't matter whether you're insured or not, would it?
No. I want to put this analogy to the council. If there is an epidemic tomorrow and everybody got the flu, a bad case of it, and the government comes in and says, do you have health insurance? If you don't, we're going to reduce your lifespan by X amount because you obviously don't care about your health. You didn't purchase private health insurance. Does that make sense?
Well, probably a better example would be we will only provide support for people who had flu injections because they took a step to, protect against the particular thing that happened. But what they're missing the point is that you don't take out insurance against the government, wanting to voluntarily acquire your house after a disaster, you take out insurance because something might damage your house to get it fixed. But as you say, you could fix your house if it was in the green zone.
Exactly.
Yeah. Glenn and then Ali.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ernest, for this. Obviously, you're saying 3.2 and 3.6, make sure of the facts, do the fact checking
Yes.
by the council. And so I'm very keen that the community boards are involved and the residents' associations. We've had a few
Thank you.
muck-ups there. So how would you like to engage over this process or continue to engage?
The report says there is only 74 households in the residential red zone. I think that we can all put everybody in one room and everybody knows their neighbourhood quite well, and we can all check the maps and provide the facts.
Yep. Ali?
Quickly, it's costing an average of $3.1 million, or it did in 2014, to keep services into the residential red zone for 74 residents. What do you say to people who say that that is an unfair cost on the rest of the city?
Well, we didn't cost this, like I said, and assuming that we accept the accounting methodology and the accuracy of this number, it's the government, the numbers that you just quoted, the costs. It was the government, the central government, that essentially caused the residents to move out, and so statistically reduced the number of residents still remaining, and so artificially inflated the per household cost. So I think we should ask the government to front up and foot most of the bill, if not all of it, because it caused the problem, not the residents.
Yeah, I think that we're keen when we get to the particular paper to actually not make the decision today, but to refer it to the two community boards, which are Hagley Ferrymead and Burwood Pegasus, in order to actually do that fact checking and to look at some of the issues, because not all of the issues will relate to the residential occupation either. You know, because one of the parks, for example, it needs to be accessible, as well. So decisions around roads in relation to that park, you wouldn't cut it off because there isn't any residents down there, but you might want to keep it open because actually that improves access to the park. So, there's quite a bit of work to be done around these things. It's easy to look at maps and then think, oh, well, that's okay because there's no one there or whatever, but actually there are consequential effects, and we think by engaging the community boards in that process, and as you say, the 74 could fit in a room, it would be quite easy to understand what needs to be done in those areas in conjunction with the affected residents. Because, I think the point that nobody's made is that you all pay rates, which means that you've got a relationship with the Christchurch City Council, which is quite different from your relationship with central government and the decision that they made, which was not a decision that the council made.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're well over the 10. So, but look, thank you very much, and we won't deal with the paper right now. We won't deal with that item now. But I'm sure, be assured, Ernest, that we've heard your plea.